everybody, to Hearthstone Grandmasters. Thanks for sticking with us through that, but it'll be worth your while, I assure you, with our next match of Alutemu versus Posesi, Gia, who are not only joined together, I suppose you could say, in that they are from the same country, but also it feels like in their practice partners and the decks that they bring overall.
It really seems like Alutemu and Glory do tend to bring the same lineup card for card, and maybe Posesi will change one or two things here and there, but their lineups are actually drastically different this time. A whole different class that's different for them. Posesi has Warlock, namely Zoo, that is including Dark Pharaoh to Khan. Love to see it. And Alutemu instead is bringing a Rogue. And you know what? I think Posesi might have the better end of the stick here because Rogue, as we've seen it, has been struggling so much. And even from the whisperings of the other regions, it seems like people kind of expected it to be the weak link.
I can definitely see it doing well. Again, you have to think about classes in the context of the metagame that they are in. It's not just objective power level. If we think back to last week, Druid is not a bottom 3 class, really, or it's not close to Paladin and Shaman, but it was still doing poorly because of how it matches up against those. And Rogue feels like it's in a somewhat similar spot here, although maybe not quite so drastically obvious, in that it is a powerful deck, a powerful class at the moment, but it just struggles against the likes of Demon Hunter, Warrior, and whatever other aggro deck is being brought on top. And because of that, I think I would have to give the ever so slight edge to Posesi going into this series.
I would agree. You said whatever, so aggro deck at the end, be it Face Hunter like Chonsu and Stas brought, or the Zoo, which is being brought by Posesi here. But we are going to go into Rogue versus Druid first. Yet another matchup where I feel the Rogue probably will have a hard time, especially since Alutemu is not running Highlander.
And we saw Surrender approach this matchup in a very cool way, I thought, by holding on to the Blackjack Stunner and a Praise Galakron, clearly going for a very aggressive early game proactive plan, which worked out almost in a win for him. He wasn't quite able to get there, but it gave him the best chance possible. And if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say Alutemu's going for the same thing, getting rid of Togwaggle there in his starting hand. Clearly indicates he's going for a more aggressive game plan, given that Togwaggle is usually a premium card to keep.
Yeah, I would normally say that in some matchups, Rogue can try and outlast the aggro by just backstabbing things and so on, but Druid just have waves and waves of threats. Really afford to be the defender so much as race them before they can even get to those threats. But unfortunately for Alutemu, the post-mulligan hand was just a bunch of air, and Posesi with the double fungal fortunes and the overgrowth is going to be popping off real soon.
He absolutely is. The response from that for Alutemu is there in Flick Skyshift. Like we've been saying, that is pretty much the only good answer that Rogue has to a Glowfly, apart from proactively developing beforehand. So we definitely have a game on our hands here, as Alutemu is left with, Posesi is left without much follow-up outside of that.
Already, as early as this turn, he's thinking about whether he plays the second fungal, because he will go up to 10 cards and possibly overdraw. Of course, there's some cards he could get, like Innervate or Moonfire to use here, and he did, and wait, he doesn't have to play that because he didn't overdraw. Yeah, because he discarded the mouse cellar.
Yep.
Oopsie from Posesi.
I mean, Oopsie is right, but at the same time, a little bit of an understatement, I think it's fair to say. Moonfire, while it's a very underwhelming card in its own right, for the other Mount Seller that comes later on, or just to clear off a lackey at the crucial time, could make a big difference.
Not even any reaction from Alutemu there. But Posesi, I'm clearly aware that he messed up a little bit here. He still has the full 7 spell hand, so not quite punished for the amount of Glowflies at least, but you did bring up a good point that Moonfire has way more combo potential later on.
To be honest, Gia, as degenerate of an aggro player you are, I'm kind of surprised you weren't praising his Moonfire to the face. He's just getting the 1 damage in while he can.
Look,
I thought I'd be arguing against you here.
It plays around Alutemu seal fading his own face.
Ah, of course.
In any case, Alutemu doesn't quite have enough mana to go for Coin Flick, obviously, so it's gonna be a bit of a beating for the next turn. I would like to see him not use too many resources because he is just gonna flick next turn anyway, but at the same time he's got to be aware of the double Savage Roar. So let's say you leave up 6 Glowflies, that's still so much damage. Isn't it like 26, 27 with the hero? Maybe he does just have to use both backstab.
Right, I mean, it looks like he's toying with a full clear, or as much as he can on this turn, with a coin into Faceless. Instead, he is deviating away from that. Like you said, not clearing much at all on this turn and trying to bait out with the flick on the following turn.
Yeah, as long as he saves coin, I think this is fine. But even now, just a Savage Roar for Posesi. I love it.
Or an Innovate off the top
Oh my God!
for lethal with the Savage Roar.
There was no oopsie in this game, Derek.
No
Nothing.
oopsie at all. He was just... In order to let Hearthstone know what you're going for, you have to Moonfire face there in order to dictate that you are going for the aggressive lethal plan. Obviously, we're having a little bit of fun here because for Alutemu, that was, for the most part, a bit of a non-game. There was the option to play around that on his turn with coin into Faceless Corruptor, but I think we can quite clearly see that that would just not have been the best way to go about it. Overall, this gave him the highest chance of winning, but it didn't work out.
You know, I don't even know if it plays around it that well, because coin Faceless and double backstab removes 3 minions, then double roar is 24 from the minions. I guess it's 28 damage, not 30. But you're basically dead the next turn if you do that anyway. Like, Alutemu just couldn't do anything there. And that happens sometimes. And that is a reason for bringing Druid. Sometimes you just get that type of hand, and it just rewards you more for the lineup building than the gameplay itself, I would say.
Exactly, and that's a big part of Hearthstone, especially in tournament play. The decks that you are bringing to counteract your opponent's lineup, and the weakness of bringing Rogue, which is why Posesi has got himself arguably an advantage here by deviating over to the Warlock and the Druid instead of bringing the Rogue plus a 4th deck. But before we can jump into the next game, we're going to go to a very, very short break before we come back with the conclusion of this country team kill here between Alutemu and Posesi. Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters for our 4th match of the day, Alutemu versus Posesi and Gia, with a very quick win there being found for the Druid. It looks like at a first glance that Posesi is at a very strong advantage. Would you agree?
I wouldn't say overly strong because they do both have Druids, but I will say that the lack of Rogue for Posesi is what really puts him at a big advantage, because it seems like that's the deck that's letting people down, especially not really running up well against in matchup against the 4th deck, because we're seeing most people bringing Rogue, Demon Hunter, and Warrior. And then the option for the fourth deck so far seems to be either Zoo, Druid, or Face Hunter, all of which have a good matchup against Rogue.
Yeah, it's feeling like the weak spot for me as well. And heading into the next game for us here, which is going to be the Demon Hunter and the Warlock. A pretty cool matchup, I think, that we played a fair bit of in practice testing. It definitely felt like the Demon Hunter was at the advantage if they're able to get a couple of minions early on. But Posesi's hand, no slouch.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Scrap Imp as the most obvious keep because every time I feel like Zoo game in this matchup, it involves them having both an early Scrap Imp and a Carpet with 1-drops. It doesn't seem like one or the other is quite enough to get. But this Beaming Sidekick actually presents an interesting option here. And he's also got this Guardian Aug Merchant, which maybe, in some scenarios, allows him to actually fight evenly on board against Demon Hunter. I haven't tried it this exact way, and I'd be very hesitant to say that you can fight back against Demon Hunter early game. But if there's a hand that could do it, it might be like this.
And this is where I start to really struggle with Zoo Mulligans, because when I see this hand, my first thought is the same as Posesi, that great, this hand looks awesome. You got the Scrap Imp, 3 cards to buff with it for turn 3. This looks premium. But you have so many 1-drops that maybe we should have seen Posesi mulligan for some of the more premium ones instead.
I'm thinking anything could have on or immediate attack value is what he needs. So he got the board. That is 1 box check. Because the turn that you go off with the Scrap Imp, if Demon Hunter has this strong opener like this, and you can see Alutemu even will get the Satyr next turn, it seems like just developing on that turn will not be enough. You'll just nearly die. But he has Taunt and Boar now, so that's what Posesi needs to have some chance of evening up here.
Oh, absolutely premium there for Posesi in the minions that he discovered. But speaking of premium, we've been focusing on the Zoo sides. Look at what Alutemu has managed to do in the meanwhile. Perfect mana utilization, beautiful curve, and a ridiculous amount of damage for turn 3.
Yep, and Posesi, with only 1 Boar and no Carpet, is not able to clear both the Battlefiend and the Overseer. Or Overseer looks like the more immediate threat. But will this be too late? Alutemu has an on-curve play, but nothing really good. The Chaos Strike, well, I guess it's I-Beam first. Make sure you get the Outcast on that, but where does it land?
I'm thinking the Orc Merchant looks as good a place as any. Then you can go Hero Power plus the Chaos Strike and your, I guess, 2/2 or your 2/1/1s to take out the Void Walker as well.
Well, I'm looking at I-Beam the Void Walker, trade in your 2/2, KR, ship it all face.
Okay.
Look at this Glaive Bound, Derek. That's not going into a minion, is it?
Fair enough. Yeah, I was focusing too much on the trade plan. I need a good bit of Gia aggro mindset to set me back on track.
I guess a large part of the game plan also depends on what he gets off this Chaos Strike. But the problem is he can't draw and then evaluate because that would negate the Outcast on I-Beam in most situations. Another small nuance that makes this particular aggro deck not quite as one-dimensional as you would expect. So let's see if Alutemu will just be shipping it all face. There's also the option to face tank the Void Walker or go 1 extra damage face to maintain your board. Yeah, I think I like this even better.
Maximum minion sticking on the board whilst getting as much damage as possible. And like you said, this is kind of coming true again, where it's not just the Scrap Imp that's enough. The Carpet feels like it's a pretty necessary part of the deal in order to clear off absolutely everything.
And Posesi, if he wants to come back against this board or defend somehow, he needs to tap. And that in itself is advancing Demon Hunter game plan somewhat.
Well, he doesn't have to here. There's, I think, a valid approach to just go for, the 2 1-drops and the Expired Merchant, which I think is buffed as well. And just try and dominate the board again.
You can see that for this turn, but or next, if he's not able to set up the 2-turn. Although, this hand does look like it might get the 2-turn if he doesn't trade everything. I don't know. Now it's not a 2-turn for sure. So, for Alutemu, he doesn't have a 2-turn of his own. because he's not drawn any burst outside of the Gravebound, which isn't even active this turn.
I grow impatient.
So his two options, as I see it, well, the main thing he wants to try and do, I guess, is set up for the Dream Skull on the following turn if the Twin Slice comes off the top. But if that's happening, maybe he's just playing Altruist anyway.
I do think he has to pivot here. He can't get there over 2 turns, so he's got to trade into the 4-1 with his minion and one of the 3-1s with his attack. Try and distract Posesi from hitting face, and then hopefully get the Dream Skull, as you said. It's such an interesting dance in these aggro mirrors. Like, if there's X amount of damage on board, you can go face. If it's anything above that, you can't.
And I think here, while we were looking at going for the non-tap plan and then pivoting back over to the maybe you can tap, what position is Posesi in here? Is it a tap to find more cards, or is it this will get the job done alone?
All dependent on whether he can set up a 2-turn lethal while clearing this board. So I'm looking at figuring out how the trades work and then figuring out if he has to tap. I was thinking of something like Stone Tusk into the 2-2 and then trade off his 4-3 so that the attack buff of the Fiendish immediately goes onto his attacking minion. But he's just saying, if you develop the board this way, it's still, I believe, presenting enough damage. No, it doesn't. That's a dormant.
Yeah, it's 1 damage off lethal.
Oh my. So he does have to tap. I think it's been a little bit sloppy for Posesi here.
But was there any way he could have set up the lethal?
I mean, either way, even if you can't, if you're gonna tap that turn, it should happen first.
Well, there it is.
Okay.
This is the lethal setup. Alutemu has to find a way to fight back. And that is not it.
It really isn't. If he had gotten something like Twin Slice, that could have potentially given him the time to stay in the game with Altruist, but the way I'm seeing it, it's gonna be...
Bladebound is the only playwright to kill off 4 damage.
Can you ever skull for the other I-beam? And
You can't even play it then, right? Oh no, sorry, yeah, in the...
If it's not the last one, yeah. If it's like the first one or the second one drawn, but not the third, it can be played.
Well, because it's not outcast.
Oh wait, my bad. Yeah,
full mana. Yeah.
You're right. Ah, it really is just playbound.
Time grows short.
10, 15, 18 damage. Yep. Only play that keeps him alive. Forget about winning the game for the moment.
I think he's just thinking about whether this one attack goes to Posesi's face or to a minion. I think it makes pretty much 0 difference if you go face or kill a minion, because it's either you're dead this turn or not. I don't know.
Wait, by killing off the minion,
oh yeah,
he played around Tekkan.
You're right. That is the only difference. It's not 0. It's because of this strange tech inclusion for Posesi.
I didn't even think about that.
Insane.
It's a pretty sick play, it's got to be said.
Yeah. Very impressive from Alutemu.
As close as anything here to lethal. Alutemu needs the swing turn of the century here if he's going to be turning it around.
And it's not
and that ain't it.
It really had to be like Altruist into Crimson Sigil Runner, into another one, into Twin Slices to give him a shot here, but that's not it. He's gonna skull.
I-beam doesn't work. Yeah, there's nothing.
I yield for now.
2-0 to Posesi now up against Alutemu. It's looking like his slightly off-meta bring of omitting the rogue from his lineup in favor of the druid and the warlock is doing very well for him, because I believe now his two, again, slightly less popular decks in the druid and the warlock are the two that have taken the win. So he's left now with only his demon hunter remaining up against Alutemu, and my goodness, does that feel like a good spot to be in.
Definitely. And I have been nitpicking Posesi pretty harshly as far back as the druid game with the use of Moonfire, and also on this warlock. Just he did end up on the right play because he did end up setting a 2-turn lethal up. But just the order on the taps is a small improvement to be made. But definitely in terms of preparation, I think he's really got it unlocked, especially since he's deviated from what Alutemu and Glory are bringing. And thus far, it seems like they've always been unanimous. I think it takes a bit of courage to just disagree with your practice group and stick to your guns. Honestly, I myself, when preparing for tournaments, tend to default to the hive mentality.
Exactly. He's like the Neville Longbottom of Hearthstone. It takes courage to stand up to one's enemies, but more so to one's friends in Posesi, Alutemu, and Glory. But it's working out very much to his advantage here, with, again, only the Demon Hunter remaining. The last matchup is going to be up against the Mirror, the Demon Hunter from Alutemu as well. And there is a slight difference in overall archetype, however, between these two Demon Hunters, Gia.
That's right. Alutemu is topping out at Skull of Gul'dan, which we've seen a lot of people revert to after seeing that the Priestess of Fury build sometimes is a little bit inconsistent, and the whole strength of Demon Hunter relies on locking down the early game and making sure you spend every last bit of that precious mana and not float anything. Whereas Posesi is running that slightly more mid-rangey build with that package and Raging Fell Screamer. And you know what? There's enough differences in this lineup that I feel like maybe they just didn't prepare together at all, which is reasonable given that Posesi and Alutemu knew that they would be facing each other this weekend.
Absolutely. Oh, interesting mulligan. I have to be honest, I was kind of anticipating a full mull there for Posesi, because if you look at the power of the Umberwing in this matchup, there's not that much that it lines up very well against if you play it on curve here. It's only Crimson Sigil Runner that you're happy to play it against. Its real power comes when you have the one drop first to follow up with, and therefore I was kind of anticipating him to mull away for the Battle Mage and the Battle Fiend instead.
I disagree. I quite like the Umberwing, even if it is not guaranteed to kill anything the turn it's played.
Okay.
I think the development of the 1/1s in the early game can actually be very awkward for the opposing Demon Hunter to deal with. Their only good way of dealing with those tiny minions is later on with Altruist. And so even if you just take a little bit of incremental damage with the Umberwing, having the 1/1s to shore up the rest of the can put him in a good spot.
Fair enough, and that's exactly what Posesi is going for. I mean, your point is very valid. In terms of board control, this is a good way to go about things. In terms of health, though, this is already starting to ramp up, I think, pretty quickly for Posesi.
Yeah, it's definitely a sacrifice in the health department to try and take the early lead, and that is more significant in Demon Hunter than almost any mirror. We'll see if it can work out for Posesi here. He can just play this Shadow Weaver if he wants. Oh, freezes the face as well over the Battle Mage, because if the face can't attack, the Battle Mage can't grow.
Yes, exactly. It's a turn before Coin into Warglaives can come down, but I still really like this play because of Twin Strike, Chaos Strike, and the Umberwing itself from Alutemu in response. It's just a very nice way of ensuring that the only real way that the freeze can die outside of the trade is I-Beam, which is always good in this matchup.
There's also the Coin Cane for Alutemu that's available, and I hardly ever advocate for Cane trading, but in this particular matchup, it just seems to give him such a strong board, right? 3-5 into 4-3, 2-2 into Altruist is unlikely most of the time. I feel like you just shouldn't play around Altruist unless your opponent is telegraphing it. Like they do something like Skull and don't play anything. Maybe you can play around it then, but this early on, it's all about the value trades.
Yeah, it really doesn't feel good because Alutemu, I think, would have wanted to go Coin, Twin Slice plus Glavebound on 5, but this still opens up other possibilities. Now the Sigil Runner is being outcasted. Chaos Strike can follow up thereafter, and even if you just go Sigil Runner, Chaos Strike, Hero Power, that's a decent turn for Alutemu.
Posesi, though, he's got to draw some more removal to make him really clean, but overall, I think you'd still just take removal onto the Cane. Or he's thinking removing the Battle Fiend here actually saves him 1 health in the long run, given that most of the time, one of these Battle Fiends will be able to kill the Cane anyway.
It's definitely close. You don't know for a fact that your opponent is going to attack on the following turn, but overall I can definitely side with Posesi's play there.
And given that Demon Hunter doesn't even play any taunts. It's not like there's a huge punish for leaving a pain.
Yeah. Oh man, this is going to be getting so close. Posesi on the following turn after Alutemu develops here will have Warclaves of Azeroth to just completely sweep the board. But again, it's at that exchange of health total, which is such a crucial dynamic in this matchup.
Yes, and if you look at overall value, Posesi has it, right? You mentioned the Warclaves, he's got the Skull follow-up. But Alutemu is already going in here and says that I am going to be the aggressor. Sets up the Umber Wing, overplaying his Frozen Shadow Weaver, I think, to give him the option to not even have to play Twin Slice, to activate Glaive Bound on the following turn.
Yeah, I really like this face push as well. If your opponent's going to go for Hero Power to take out the Kayn on turn 5, you're pretty happy.
Posesi can attack many times if he wants to with this Warclaves and then just get extra damage onto his Battle Fiend if he wants.
True.
But that is the whole weapon expended if he wants to clear the whole board. I'm thinking maybe 3 minions so that the Battle Fiend isn't dead on board.
Sure.
To the 1/1.
Yeah.
It's dead to 1/1 plus weapon.
Yeah, I guess you just want to make it a little bit more awkward. But my oh my, is this a lot of damage to be taking? Alutemu, again with Adept, Twin Slice, Chaos Strike. It's just damage upon damage upon damage.
I like that from Posesi, trading off a fair amount, but saving 1 charge for the next one. Alutemu can just Twin Slice this thing away and play Glaive Bound, or just strip it all face. I kind of like that too.
How do you feel about Frozen Shadow Weaver plus Chaos Strike, and then you freeze the Battle Fiend, which allows you to just push everything face?
Love it.
Okay.
You can even fit in Hero Power and Battle Mage for that play. It doesn't have to play Twin Slice. Yeah, but in terms of mana usage, makes sense to go for Chaos Strike now.
Demons.
Obviously, Alutemu does need to be considering as the main counterplay that Posesi has available is Ivy. That's what he's playing around here by not just launching everything to the face. Because if he completely ignores board control and is then hit with a couple of I-beams, he could end up losing this series.
Posesi there, presented with the Twin Slice into I-beam option, but it's just that little bit awkward because he'd have to give up Skull. Now, if he wants to clear this Glaive Bound, he's going to take 6 in the process.
And then he's going to die.
Correct.
There's no draws he can get to save him either. Now that I-beam costs 1 mana when it is outcasted instead of the previous 0. Even a Chaos Strike off the top cannot draw him into his savior.
Very clean because Posesi goes down 5 health, Chaos Strike, Twin Slice, Minion and Hero Power can do it, or just Twin Slice, Second Slice. That means Alutemu is going to take his first win in the series. Not too surprising because I think this Demon Hunter build is favored against what Posesi has. It's really the story of whether the Rogue can get through.
That's right. This is the way that I'm expecting this to go. The extra big minions, Priestess of Fury, the Raging Fell Screamer, it's all just a little bit too late game oriented, whereas we can see the game is just decided in the first 5 turns easily, if not even sooner than that. And Alutemu does take a well-deserved win. Posesi fought back as best as he could. I still do go back to the mulligan, and I somewhat question the keep of both the Shadow Weaver and the Umberwing, because it leaves him very unlikely to find a 1-drop, whereas I feel like that is a very crucial thing to be looking for. But like you said, it did allow him to fight for board control, even if it wasn't quite enough.
I didn't catch that he also kept the Frozen Shadow Weaver. I think that is a bit suspect if you're keeping both the 2 and 3, but okay. I stand by if just the Umberwing, even without 1-drops, as a 1 keep, I think I still like it.
Fair enough. And it did pretty well overall. But like you say, that does mean that the Demon Hunter is out of the way. Druid and Rogue remaining now for Alutemu. And I'm going to say it again. I like Posesi's chances, even aside from the fact that he's 2-1 up and you're basically always favored then. I think he's just got two very nice matchups.
For sure. And I can't even which one you'd rather run up into as Demon Hunter, because even though on paper these are quite favored to the Demon Hunter, both Rogue and Druid have the blowout hands that sometimes can cheat wins against Demon Hunter. We saw a while ago very early glow flies can help with that game plan, or even just lots of backstabs. And we haven't seen a big Edwin in what feels like forever, like a big early Edwin, but that's always a possibility as well.
That's right. Generally you're looking for some of the other cards earlier on, the invoke cards and also the removal earlier on. And if I had to guess, I would definitely say that the Rogue is the matchup I'm expecting to see up against the Demon Hunter, just because of all the early removal that it can throw down, like Backstab. Praise Galakron as well. Wouldn't have been awful, but looking for the 1-drops instead.
Mm-hmm. And for Alutemu, probably one blackjack away from being able to stall out the early game cleanly. The Faircat off the top, always a welcome sight for Rogue.
Huge deal.
But that
Absolutely
is not
huge.
that is not a welcome reborn though.
Not yet. Maybe in 9 turns' time.
Imagine getting to turn 10 against Demon Hunter.
To be fair, this is again that slightly slower build of Demon Hunter. I agree with your point. Just to bring up here again, that this is the Priestess of Fury version, which is that little bit slower, runs that little bit of extra burst damage that you want to go for against the Rogue. But even having said that, Priestess of Fury is still a very powerful minion to play against Rogue. Are they going to sap it so that you can just play it again on the following turn?
Fair enough to bring up. And Posesi here, he's got the Umber Wing, but he's very scared of a potential Bamboozle, which could upgrade this cat all the way up to 4 mana.
Yeah, also worth taking into account the secrets that Alutemu is playing 2 Ambush, 1 Bamboozle, 1 Dirty Trick. A little bit different to the usual 2 Dirty Trick, 1 Bamboozle, 1 Ambush that most players are going for. And, well, it works out pretty well for him here. Just getting an extra minion on the board is exactly what he needs to start pulling things back.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's come to the point where I've seen nearly every permutation of number of secrets and which secrets you play in these rogue decks.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I've seen a double Bamboozle one of the others as well. But already this turn for Alutemu, he can choose to take a huge tempo swing, but none of these minions are particularly high value to bounce to the blackjack. That is so awkward. It's like, it says spend your mana this turn, but then you have nothing on next turn.
Which means he could, of course, Shadow Step it back to try and go for another bounce next turn. But having said that, if your opponent plays anything, it activates the ambush anyway. So that kind of negates the benefit that the blackjack would get anyway. But I like just throwing it down here. I think you just want to be as aggressive onto the board as you possibly can here.
Right.
Don't let the door hit you.
Going for it. And you know what? If that's the minion that he's stepping, I think he should absolutely hold on to the backstab. It gets way better than a couple 1/1s as far as targets go. See? The clunkiness come into play here for Posesi with the double Priestesses of Fury, but the second he draws Raging Fellscraper, this could get dirty real fast.
And speaking of clunkiness, unless Alutemu can get himself a premium draw, it's not going to slow down on the clunkiness. And Galakron, it's good later on, but that is not the draw he needed right now. This is going to start looking very rough for Alutemu. There's no two ways around it.
Mm-hmm. Or as I see it, he's got to stab the 4/2 and then trade his 2/3 into the 2/2. Only question is whether he wants to step the ambushed minion just to replay it and have it not die straight up to hero power. It sounds terrible. Everything sounds terrible.
Welcome to my world, yeah.
On the bright side for Alutemu, Posesi's next turn is looking to be Kayn. which doesn't line up particularly well against the poisonous minion. So if Posesi wants to get down a safe Kane, it will have to be on a later turn. Still got the Crimson Sigil Runner to find something better to do.
I mean, there were multiple options there. Alutemu could trade and then Shadow Step his guy to heal it back up to 3, potentially, if he wants to keep as much on board as he possibly can. Again, I agree that it's worth saving the Shadow Step there to get something a little bit more juicy, because no matter what Alutemu does here, he is relying on the top of his deck 100%.
Yeah. So he takes the option, allows him to save the Shadow Step and all the health on his ambush minion. So it can't die straight up to Hero Power. So Posesi here, gonna dig through his own deck, see what's at the top. Not very impressive.
Yeah, helps him fill out the mana at the very least.
Just a little bit. So let's talk best draws for Alutemu. I'm thinking Shield of Galakrond. I am thinking even Evil Miscreant to some extent, because he could step it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, he's got to play the step to activate the combo, so... Oh no! I'm talking about best draws. That's the worst one! Because he's already got Galakrond in hand.
How, as Rogue, does your hand cost 23 mana going into turn 5? And one of those costs 0.
And you can't play any of them.
You can't play any of them, yep. Shadow Step is nigh on useless here.
But you know what, Dara? Come turn 10, you can play Colossus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No.
Oh, Gia, I wonder if this game we're going to get to see the rarest and dankest of all plays. Kronks for 0 battle cry value. Oh, the good old bad Boulder Fist Ogre on 6.
Is that even rarer than the Taunt Wind Fury Siamat?
It's close. It's very
I feel
close.
like I need to fill out a Hearthstone bingo card now.
His weakness.
You've seen that, and you've seen the 0 battle cry. What else? Give me something good, Dara.
We're with you.
Gia predicting a line correctly. I mean, it has to be the Kronks, right?
Yeah, I hate it, but yes. I can't look, Dara. It's too yucky.
So many options.
I don't think... Well, okay, so you can either go for it now to try and seize tempo, or you could just pass completely, Galakrond on 7, clear the board with Kronk on 8. That might just be better.
Okay, what if you're so far behind that you have to say that this praised Galakrond has a Kobold Laki in it? It just always does. And then you play that, you step it, you play the other one, that clears board. You know what? I wouldn't hate it, because this is just so terrible. All his other options... He didn't have other options until this turn.
Choose soon.
My bingo card is getting closer.
Posesi, I think, taking a second to be like, what is going on here? Why on earth did that Kronks not do anything? There's only one reason why.
Yeah.
And obviously he can know now that Galakrond is in hand.
I feel so bad for Alutemu
And he can know,
here.
therefore, that he is in a fantastic position.
And, you know, the amount of information this gives Posesi is incredible. Aside from knowing that Galakrond is in hand, he knows that this Reborn is like only either the 7/5 that generates a 1/1 or Colossus of the Moon. The rest of them would have been played by
right.
now. I guess Generous Mummy is the third one.
Okay, Faceless Corruptor does allow for a most of a board clear on this turn at least, which has to be
Okay.
better than the Galakrond.
All about him.
You know, I was even thinking of Alutemu steps his Faceless Lackey before
Yes,
that.
me too. It's a bad trade again there, but I don't know. I think you have to trade into the 4-2. Like, your opponent's just going to start dominating the board way too much otherwise.
I agree. And this Priestess has a good chance of just clearing the board for Posesi.
Yeah.
My blades will.
Because the Kronks was played, I'm not even sure what single draw off the Galakrond can try and help Alutemu get out of this one, but at least his Faceless survives.
Yeah, even if a Togwaggle were to come off the Kronks, you obviously can't play the Wand on the same turn, but it's going to have to be a draw of that caliber for there to be any chance for Alutemu to take this back at all.
Well, it can get reasonably large.
So that can be an 8-8 on this turn, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If he plays it, steps it, plays it.
Mm-hmm.
The Brotherhood shall prevail.
And then he kills the 4-2.
Yeah.
But then, Priestess goes face, Wavebound, we go face. Or can we see the rarest of Priestess kills, the double Priestess taking down an 8-8?
Yeah, it's not often you see that. There's a whole game full of rarities.
You know what? I don't hate it. He just plays it this turn, Hero Power Space. Even if it doesn't kill the Edwin, how's Rogue gonna deal an additional 30? And the less damage that hits the Edwin, the more that goes to the face.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any way that Posesi loses. Even if there's a Heist Baron Togwaggle, it can't be played with the treasure on the same turn. And that's the only way that Alutemu has left to try and scam his opponent.
My blades will.
I think Alatemu's been scammed by his own deck. He just hasn't had a good turn this game.
Even if Flick can come down to clear off both of these, it's just so likely that Posesi sets up lethal for next turn.
Even another step off the top. Deck's just taunting him. Nothing good has happened for Alutemu since Pharaoh Cat on 1. But you know what? He very nearly made it to turn 10 there. Play Colossus of the Moon.
So who's the real victor here, Aegea? The player who won, or the player who almost played an unplayable card? I ask you that. Probably the player who actually won.
Yeah, I would wager that for sure. Alutemu taking his first win of the round robin. And guys, if you were not paying attention to the beginning or you weren't here at the beginning, this round robin is actually just one pass through the whole. Yep. It's very little games of Hearthstone being played compared to the first half when we had Swiss. So every single match is high stakes here, and that's got to be kind of a heartbreaker for Alutemu.
But to be fair to Posesi on the other side, I think he piloted that beautifully. Aside from the couple of very small technical misplays that we saw from like the Moonfire coming down when it didn't need to, I think the overall strategy to deviate from the expected and leave out the rogue is what really gave him the chance of taking the win here this weekend. As we've kept praising him for, his decks just looked more favored than Alutemu's coming in. He was just ahead right from the get-go.
Yeah, the only questionable bring, I would say, is the build of the Demon Hunter. Because I feel that the Tempo Demon Hunter is not only better in the mirror, but also possibly better against Rogue, because it just kills them quicker. Although it seems that no matter what Demon Hunter you bring, Rogue is going to have a hard time. And really, Rogue has just been the letdown of the weekend, and I hate to see it as somebody that has played more games of Galakrond Rogue than I care to admit on stream.
Oh, Gia, I'm right with you there. It is a beautiful deck indeed, but today is not its days to shine. But it is, however, Posesi's day to shine. And taking a look at the schedule, we can see who may be up next for a chance to take a win. I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that we are moving on to Division B now. We are all wrapped up with the happy matches for today, where players are fighting mainly for the chance to get to playoffs. Now moving down into Division B with Frosty and Blitzchung. There's still the potential for playoffs for the top few players, but much more real is the threat of relegation. 3 players at the end of this season will be relegated out of Hearthstone Grandmasters, and Frosty and Blitzchung are 2 very real contenders.
Yep, and because the relegation in Division B's bottom 2 slots is automatic, it's pretty much these 7 matches of round robin they play across these next few. That's it. No second chances if you end up 7th or 8th. And even if you're 5th or 6th, it's still very scary to have to play through that relegation bracket. So I would argue that this is even higher stakes for those in Division B.
I would definitely argue that as well. And now, moving on to